Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software Greatech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Katie Hall. She is the founder and CEO of Claira, which is a platform that unleashes the true potential of your workforce using advanced competency science and machine learning. Before starting Claira, Katie spent 10 years in global workforce development, where it became clear that customers and the market were ready for a more precise, inclusive future of work. Katie regularly speaks and writes on a variety of topics, including diversity hiring, AI ethics, and the automation impact of the workforce. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So I always like to get kind of people's background stories on how they ended up in this industry to begin with. So what brought you to the industry?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a born and raised proud Midwesterner. I live here in Michigan. My family's still here, spent most of my life here, except for a couple of stints in Boston, DC, and spent a lot of time in the public sector. So worked for the government, and then most recently 10 years in nonprofit. So I was with an economic development nonprofit for about 10 years doing specifically workforce development. Worked with a lot of companies in Detroit, lots of companies in the Midwest, but also many other cities around the US and internationally, as you mentioned. And those, I focused heavily on manufacturing, construction, lots of industrial industries, some logistics. And so, I also worked on a factory line for 4 years. And so I have a bit of an industrial background. So in that time, I worked with a lot of businesses the current system for managing human capital was just a constant challenge, right? Especially in industries like manufacturing, construction. Maybe you've got a resume, maybe you don't. Maybe you have a degree, maybe you don't. Those things just matter less and less. And they only work for some labor market segments, some jobs. And so we were constantly trying to help these companies figure out how to get the right people in the door, retain them, train them to move up in the organization. And so that led me to start Claira, which is a software company that tries to help competencies be the only mechanism, no JDs, no resumes, no assessments, competencies everybody has and all industries can use. So that's what we built.
Yeah, I like it. Awesome. What part of the hand of Michigan are you from? My godmother lives up in Michigan, so I get to go up there from time to time. It's a great, beautiful state. Nice.
Yeah,
I always love that. I'm right here.
I know. I got asked that a couple of times for the first time when I was out in Boston. People had never seen this before. The hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you know
it's awesome. It's a very handy trick.
It's helpful. No other state can do it, right? So.
That's right. So what are some of the hurdles that you see the industry facing coming in to 3 months here so far into 2023? What are some of the hurdles that they have to overcome with workforce?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, the market's crazy right now. We live in a crazy time. We're talking to a lot of construction companies, manufacturing companies, industrials broadly. Industrials are our primary customer base, so you hear me reference them a lot. Just about the risk in the market. So there's risk built into all sorts of operations right now. Obviously, the financial markets are crazy. Everybody's talking about banks. This affects how many people are in the workforce, what types of jobs they're looking for, what types of stability they're looking for. Hiring is hard right now. So making the most of your current talent is a really big deal. We're finding in 2023, we're actually hearing more and more from customers, hiring is so difficult that optimizing each person I've got on a line or on a project or on a site is like, it means everything to my business. That's our future. Maximizing your current bench of talent, if you're getting 40% out of somebody, you've got to get 60% out of them or 70% out of them to keep delivering on time. Construction's building the world, right? So getting enough talent directly impacts growth and pace and delivering projects efficiently. We talked to a customer about a month ago who said, we're building things. And so getting our people right is incredibly important and incredibly expensive. Like we could lose $1 million on a project in a day if a site stops moving, for example. So
Sure.
You hear that a lot from the industry early months of this year, just that cost challenge. can't grow fast enough, pressure to deliver on time.
Yeah. So what can companies do to really help optimize and create those efficiency gains from their current workforce?
Yeah. I mean, my perspective, of course, is that, your people are your biggest asset, of course, which these companies know. Uh, and getting really clear and focused on what exactly you need to hire and when for projects
Mhm.
specifically, where they're coming from, and what the skills are that they come in with is super important and really hard. Um, if you know those things, you can make better choices about moving people around. Maybe you need help on a second project. You could move, who are the 5 or 6 people you could move over there so that project doesn't go down or get delayed. So getting
Yeah.
really challenge yourself to get clear on the skills that you actually need. Instead, it's easy to just get in a rhythm, right? Bring people in, put them on a job. But who are the high performers? Where do you get your best people from? How do you get people to stay? If you get clear on that, you can move people around more easily. You can hire more precisely. Your people cost less and they'll usually stay longer. So, like, we talk to a lot of companies who say, I'm trying to plan ahead to mitigate against this economy and the risk, but I don't really know what my starting point is. And
Mm.
that's true. That's the problem. So it may be as simple as just a questionnaire or a skills map. Our software helps you with the skills map, but you can take really small steps and inexpensive steps and get a lot more clarity that'll pay off.
Yeah. So why then are companies not or taking the time to really kind of map out the competencies and
Yeah.
level setting of where we are now, where we want to be in, 5, 10 years, and where's the delta between the two?
Yeah, it's an investment, right? It's an investment of capital or of your people's time. It's certainly an investment of leadership's time
Mhm.
to put effort into an initiative like this. And I know how this feels, right? I run a startup. There are so many emergencies day to day or fires that you're just trying to keep up with when you're operating
Right.
a business and
Sure.
operating a site. So this sometimes ends up on the list of, that's great, we'll do it at some point. Um, but what's hard is the sooner you do it and get the data, the sooner the data will start working for you and cutting your costs and helping you grow faster. So it's one of those things that you have to fit in and make a little bit of time for. The other, I think, bigger challenge is, you know, there's lots of talk right now in the press, especially since the pandemic, about skills-based economy. We're going to move
Mhm.
away from degrees and employers want to use skills to hire, but there's not really an alternative system yet. So companies either have to experiment with new innovations like ours, or they have to try to create it themselves internally and piece it
Yeah.
together. Um, so that's it's hard when the system's been the way it's been on hiring and people management for so long. You have a process, and maybe it's good enough. So it requires an experiment, requires setting aside a little bit of time to make change.
Yeah. And it's funny how change management comes up in so many of our conversations because everything comes back when you're trying to innovate, you're trying to change, you're bringing in new technology. It for sure, change management is a huge hurdle that you have to change the mindset, not even just the practice, but the mindset of, yes, this is working, this will work, and kind of create the use case and the benefits of it and get everybody bought into that process.
Yep, exactly.
So on the human side of construction, what do you think of when you hear that phrase? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like we talked about a little bit ago, workforce is your biggest asset as a company, right? The people who make up the business and deliver the work are everything. They're the core of the business. When I hear the human side of construction, I think
Mhm.
about work that I did in the early days in Michigan with some construction and manufacturing companies, and I would hear from a lot of leaders about, we have the greatest people. They're incredibly hard workers. The work is they're building the world, like I said, right? What could be more important than that?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but construction still has this PR problem, same as manufacturing, because of the big college policy push back in the day, right? And people don't understand how high tech construction is and how important
Mhm.
it is and how much it's going to grow. I mean, 80% of the world's going to live in a city. Someone has to build the cities. So it's, the people of construction, I think, are fighting for the respect that they deserve. And this goes all the way from laborers up into management. So I always hear a little bit of that from the leaders and from just folks on job sites in construction. We love what we do. We love the team that we work with. We love doing physical work, and we feel like it matters because we're building things, but maybe the rest of the world doesn't really get it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're preaching on my soapbox there for sure. Yeah, I think 100% construction has a huge marketing problem outside of construction because, I tell people that I host a podcast around construction innovation and technology, and they're like, "Oh, that's a boring podcast. There's nothing happening in construction." I'm like, you're just ignorant. You don't know what's happening, and we have to do a better job in the industry to reach people outside that haven't had the exposure. Because how would you know that there's innovation and incredibly smart, creative problem solvers in the industry unless we that are in the industry are telling those stories and sharing what's actually happening out here?
Right.
How should people really go about that? And maybe how does technology then come alongside and equip those people to better tell those stories, to start changing the PR and marketing problem?
Yeah, I think there is sort of a market-wide system shift underway, which is, as you were talking about change management. That's a necessary ingredient, right? It's really hard to change perception just inside out only, especially with the policy push. I mean, all the data shows what the impact was of everyone has to go to college. Right now, we're routinely short on the technical talent that we need for all the critical trades. Some countries like Germany and lots of other countries in Europe have better sort of two-track pipelines than we do because of that. So we've been paying for that, and there was some benefit, fine, but we've been paying for that for a long time. So I think the pandemic helped. I think there was already a shift underway, but that was accelerated because the whole world started paying attention to frontline workers, the fact that there was no good mechanism for shifting labor market supply quickly enough to keep up with demand. One of our first pilots at Claira was placing unemployed hospitality workers into logistics jobs because they share a bunch of the same competencies. So that gap became really evident because of the pandemic. I think business is moving towards skills for management of people and hiring, which helps. I think the government is starting to pay attention to that. We're going to be forced to pay attention because we're going to be so short on technical people in the AI age. We're already short. So, we worked with a lot of construction companies who would go into elementary schools, middle schools, right? They would go to the technical colleges, career training centers, make sure that there was information about all the cool tech that you're going to use on job sites and what it's really like to design and execute on a building site. We were really effective with apprenticeships. I think any job-based training is still great for construction, manufacturing, logistics. Get people in there. They'll get to experience what it actually is. Podcasts like this are great. Publications, events. I think cross-industry events where people outside construction are mingling with leaders from construction. I've gone to a lot of industry association events that were mixed like that, and that certainly helps get the word out. So that's some of what's in progress. Yeah, that's working.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the competency approach. How does really focusing in, looking at competency, how does that allow for really greater flexibility for the company moving forward?
Yeah. So competencies are just something you can do on the job, stuff you can do at work. I don't want to get too into the weeds of it. It's a bit of a science. Competencies are. The rest of the world's actually further ahead at using competencies than the U.S. is in some ways, partly because we're so fragmented, right? There are kind of 50 little countries here. The rest of the world has sometimes what are called qualifications frameworks, which basically say, hey, Europe, if you have this credential, an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, these are the things you're prepared for in the workforce. So competencies are just the little statements. Manages a team of laborers on a job site, listens with empathy to someone who disagrees with you. They're just sentences of things people can do. If you get that granular, like what are all Todd's competencies? What are all Katie's competencies? If you get that granular, you can apply those to lots of different roles, lots of different industries. People come into jobs with competencies from all sorts of experiences. Maybe they were a veteran. Maybe they took care of a grandparent at home. Maybe they drove an Uber, or they were in healthcare in a foreign country before they moved here. Those are hard to quantify right now. Those don't really live digitally anywhere right now,
Right.
especially with the construction workforce. Not really online. So if we can uncover those, you can plug those into parts of your business where they can help. And that allows you to use people you currently have more effectively, as opposed to just hiring for people who are going to give you 20 or 30% of what a role needs. So get really little, and then you can plug and play way faster and way more easier.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. How do you then really quantify the people's contributions without losing the human side?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. We talk about that a lot with our current customers. We're certainly using machine learning in the software, but
Mhm.
this is a perfect problem for machine learning. We are sort of the data backbone of your people, which allows humans to do what humans do best as far as managing people, listening to them, figuring out which personalities go better together, talking to them about their development plan, or where are they going to go next within your company.
Mhm.
When we can provide a data set in the background, that allows humans to not try to collect and maintain all that data. So the machine gets to do what it's good at. And then the humans have a data set and they can do what they're good at. So those two things certainly go together.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that partnership for sure too. A lot of times with AI, it seems at first like it's threatening. It's going to come for people's jobs, and that's always the great fear. But I see AI really the people that are able to harness it and leverage it well. It frees them up because they don't have to focus on the uh, mundane tasks, for lack of a better word. They get to focus on the creative aspects and be able to do, as you said, do what people do best and machines can't do. We can be more creative. We can use our intuition. And there's some times where we're like, yeah, I know the data's saying this, but maybe in the real world we have to go over here. And we have that flexibility. And without the data set kind of grounding us in factual reality, it makes it a lot harder to make a truly educated opinion and guess.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's a headline for a lot of our companies. We, like machine learning is great at recognizing patterns. Patterns
Hmm.
are the things that allow us to make better workforce decisions. Who are your top performers and why? What is the top competency you need on a job site for this type of project or this type of project? It's almost impossible. That lives in HR minds and the minds of leadership, but it's almost impossible to keep that up to date. So even if you're just able to pull a few trends or patterns from the data and use some evidence to cut costs and show your employees that you're using evidence, right? It's not just what your supervisor thinks. That helps on both
Yeah.
sides of the coin, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. How do you get people over the hurdle of that AI kind of fear and trepidation?
Yeah, yeah. AI people already sort of have AI fatigue, right? It's everywhere. We're talking about it everywhere, and everything's AI now, right? Especially
Yeah.
startups. Like 30% of all the startups getting funded are AI. So there's already fatigue, and we actually, we get into it with our customers about the detail of how the engine works, and we're transparent about the choices it's going to make and the data sets we're using to train the model and all that. But it really
Mhm.
is the background machine. I mean, they assume that it's smart and that it's going to work for them and it's going to help them. We that helps get people over the hurdle. We are training, we're going to train the models with fresh data, and we're removing as much of the bias as possible. So job description and resume training data is missing huge segments of the population, for example. So we're trying to crowdsource some data from all sorts of labor market segments, people with degrees, without degrees, all different age groups, experience levels. That helps. That conversation helps with customers. They want to know that it's going to be inclusive and that it's going to apply to their workforce. We also just, we just convince them to run an experiment, right? Let's get in and do a pilot. We'll show you how it works. We'll show you the types of insights that it's going to create for you. And it's going to learn what you want to see, what's most helpful for your business. And if you don't see value, then we don't have to keep working together. But a lot of companies do the pilot and realize, wow, we didn't even know that stuff. So we try to get in. I think that's how innovation happens. I think you get in quickly and you do experiments and you learn, and then you do another experiment. I think that's the way to get over the hurdle. Just demystifying some of the understanding and doing experiments. Those are the two big ones.
Yeah, I like that experimentation, because I think you have to be able to run something really quick, adapt, figure out what you can learn from it, what worked well, what didn't, and move on and keep tweaking it along the way. And that's where you create those 1% improvements, and over a year you have a huge impact, because you were able to really push that needle far just by focusing on those little 1%. So you mentioned something on removing bias. Unpack that for me more. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do you remove bias in the data?
Yeah. So that is a big project and a big challenge. We're actively working on it right now. As you know, and as your listeners know, AI requires mountains of data. And so you've got to get that from somewhere, and you've got to keep the data pipeline flowing to keep training the models. And if you don't like the data that's currently out there, you've got to create new data, which is a huge undertaking. So there's also a lot going on with data AI bias, especially in the HR space. I think a couple of years ago, the FTC ruling came down about, hey, software companies, we're watching you. And we're going to check on you and make sure that you're not making choices that are going to negatively impact organizations. So this is increasingly on the minds of leaders who are purchasing software that has anything to do with human capital. More hiring, workforce development is sort of secondary, but anything related to humans where AI is providing information, that's going to be a hot topic, and they're going to keep watching that. So competencies, I'd go so far as to say the reason Claira exists is to make everybody in the workforce matter, right? Everybody in the world, everywhere, has competencies. So competencies as a system are less biased than the current system, which not everyone can participate in. So that's sort of the bedrock. And then building on that, we tried to create a data set that was globally relevant. So we pulled from industries all over the world, lots of different frameworks, industry taxonomies. The Department of Labor has industry taxonomies for construction, manufacturing, cyber, pulled from all of those and removed gendered language. And then also are augmenting the data with crowdsourced data direct from the labor market in their terms. The last thing we did is that we structure competencies in a specific way. They all include knowledge, skill, context, and level, and they start with an active verb. So that standardized protocol allows us to treat everybody the same, for lack of a more elegant way of saying it. So we know that, men and women write resumes differently. If the competency statements are standardized, we can remove some of that error.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so you're taking what the kind of the input of what people are giving you, but then kind of tweaking the language so that it's all the same. If somebody writes the essence of the same thing, but in different words, that you're standardizing it. That's a very inarticulate way, I think, that I just put it, but is that basically the gist of it?
That's it. We want it to be inclusive, but there has to be a protocol to reduce error. So we're going to include everybody, and we're going to pull data from everywhere but we have to
Mhm.
standardize it so that we reduce the bias and balance the system.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah, interesting. So let's kind of pivot for a couple minutes and talk on the hiring trends that are out there in the industry right now. So there's been, you look at the tech segment, and it's just been a wild, crazy up and down ride of you see all the layoffs happening in technology space, and
Yeah.
obviously with Silicon Valley Bank going, there's a lot of crazy turmoil happening in that space right now. What should construction kind of be on the lookout for with hiring trends for the foreseeable future, and
Yeah.
what can we learn from other industries that are going through that turmoil to kind of help steady construction?
Yeah. Yeah. Hiring is a bit of a mess right now. It's been a crazy few years. That is for sure.
Roller
There,
coaster.
yes, no doubt about it. There was some good research that came out the last couple of weeks about hiring trends broadly, I think. Um, so I'm thinking a little bit about more specific conversations I had with industrial customers.
Mhm.
Hiring is, we talk a lot about it takes 6 months and $5,000 to hire somebody, to hire one person. That's an aggregate across all industries. A lot of construction roles are shorter and take less time than that, right? Sometimes you need people 2 weeks later for a job. So that's an aggregate across all industries. What I think is true across all industries is it's taking longer and it's costing more, which is really bad news, especially for industrials. We, I read a case study I think in January about an entire portfolio of projects was canceled because they couldn't get enough talent to the job sites in time, and there were already teams commuting in from like an hour and a half and still having
Wow.
trouble to get enough bodies on a site. So, I mean, planning is everything. I know a lot of contractors who are trying to get more lead time on investors and what's coming up 18, 24, 48 months out. The more you can
Mhm.
plan, the sooner you can start sourcing, obviously. Source from places you might not normally think of. So, a lot of recruiting still happens word of mouth. The big job sites, but sometimes signs are just posted in windows still, right? Post signs in factories, technical schools. But go places where maybe you haven't thought to look yet. Facebook, Reddit. I'm just throwing out examples. Think outside the box. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of bodies who aren't digital right now who
Mhm.
fit construction roles and maybe even did this work in a previous job or in a previous country before they came here. You have to find out where they're hanging out and where their friends are hanging out and go to them. We had a company who had really good success actually switching to Facebook to advertise for construction jobs, which they'd never done before.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to think outside the box, plan further ahead, and you know, back to the beginning, just get really specific about what your gaps actually are for the project. Who can you repurpose? How do you keep them? Is there a way to string them project to project so you're not starting over every time? I
Mhm.
know a company was trying to get like 40% carryover within one city, project to project. And that can make a big difference if you can figure out how to keep them. So you're going back to the same pool who you know will fit and you're not just
Yeah.
starting over every time. That's a lot of churn.
Right.
That's a backbreaker. So,
Oh, for sure, for sure. I love the think creatively on new audiences, if you will,
mm,
to recruit in. We were talking with a guest recently. Her name's Amy Marks, and she was brought up how she was at her daughter's rugby tournament and noticed how there was already people that were welders on the team, and she was like, "Why are we not talking with women's rugby players and trying to pull them into construction because they're strong, they're fit, they're competitive, they're determined, they don't mind getting their hands dirty." And so she started a whole campaign and effort to reach out to rugby players and bring them into construction. I was like,
yeah,
that's brilliant. Thinking
that's
outside
awesome.
the box of like, yeah, this kind of back to the competency
Yep.
angle of it. They
Yep.
have a competency that fits in line with construction. Why not make that connection between the two and try to bring them in? And she's having a lot of really good success bringing in rugby players, and they're pumped.
We love that. I love that. That's a great example. Athletes are a great example. Groundskeepers, anyone in maintenance is a great pipeline. For construction,
Mhm.
we had a couple of companies with really good success there. The military is, of course, a great pipeline, right? So any organization you
Yeah.
go to where you can get access to vets is also great. So I love that. Good example.
Yeah. Very cool. So, one of our kind of core tenets on the show is around innovation. So, what does innovation mean to you?
I think I kind of let the cat out of the bag earlier. Innovation to me is, of course, pushing boundaries. I ferociously attack systems that just don't work anymore. Don't settle. Things don't have to be the way they've always been, right?
Mhm.
Things should always be up for change. Everything and all the time. So if something is frustrating, don't just be frustrated, attack it, right? Everything needs to change. Um, and innovation is experiments, like I said earlier. It doesn't have to be a big scary thing that happens at businesses, or sort of that elusive thing that you think you should focus on or spend money on and that you want people to pay attention to. It really is just a series of small experiments. That's what innovation is. Like you
Mhm.
said, you do an experiment, you get a couple people on board, you collect a little bit of data. Maybe it worked, maybe it fell on its face, and then you do another experiment. And data moves people. And, nobody, like, people didn't like cabs, but nobody knew how different the world could be until you could call your own car. So
Right.
just start,
Game changer.
yeah, just start chipping away by doing experiments. So challenge everything, start small, collect data.
Yeah. I love it. I love the ferociously attack what's frustrating you.
Oh, right?
That's
Doesn't have to
that's
be.
brilliant. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm gonna be using that. Hope you don't mind.
You can have.
uh, so, how do people find out more information on what's going on at Claira or connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. You can just search for Katie Hall, Claira, and Claira.ai is our website. So you can get in touch with anybody on our team through the website. Learn more about our customers, sign up for a demo, and we're always wanting to talk to companies about how they're trying to innovate, what their biggest pain points are. So reach out to us anytime.
Awesome. Well, Katie, final question for you. If I could give you all power and you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in construction, what would you pick to innovate?
Oh my gosh, the magic wand question. Change
That's
one
right.
instruction. Uh, I would change that there are no more resumes or job descriptions ever. They are gone as of right now. People just get hired based on their skills. I think that would help construction dramatically.
Awesome. I like it. Good answer. Well, Katie, thanks so much for taking the time. This was really fun. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, agree. I learned a lot as well. Thanks for having me.